In our previous class, we studied about the nature of psychological data. What is data? What is the meaning of data? And what are the different kinds of data? And in today's class, we will be studying about how do we go about collecting these informations, this data. Okay, you cannot just collect data randomly. So there are varieties of data collected which cannot be done by one simple method of inquiry. So you need varieties of methods to collect data. Okay, so in today's class we will be studying about all those methods. Psychologists use a variety of methods like observation, experimental, correlational, survey, psychological testing, and case study to collect data. We will be studying about each and every method in details later. Okay, so see, we can choose different study areas, different areas for our research study, and if our study areas are different, so our data's also are going to be very different, right? So we cannot just have one single method to collect varieties of data. So we have different methods of collecting data for our research purpose. Okay, so the aim of this section is to guide you to select the methods by which you can use different kinds of methods for different research purposes. For example, suppose you want to study about people's behavior while watching a football or cricket match. So in this kind of research, you can actually go there and be a part of the audience, and you can observe the behaviors of spectators while watching the match. Okay, and suppose you want to study the relationship between intelligence and self-esteem. Okay, then for prediction purposes, I already told you that in research work we make hypothesis, we predict the outcome. So say if you want to conduct a research on high intelligence and the relationship between high intelligence and high self-esteem, so at that point of time you can use a correlational method of data collection. And if you want to study about individual differences in personality or levels of motivation, at that point of time you can use psychological tests to find out individual differences. Okay, and there is another method of collecting data which is known as your case study, where you can do a case study on a single person. Suppose you want to study the development of language in a child, so you can choose a particular child and you can do a thorough case study on that particular child. Okay, so yes, I just gave you a brief about it, but we are going to study one by one all these methods properly. Okay, so first we will be talking about observational methods. So observation is a very powerful tool of psychological inquiry. So it is an effective method of describing behavior in our day-to-day lives. Also we observe many things, and after observing many things we come to some kind of conclusion. Okay, so but again our day-to-day life observation is different from the observations of a scientific study. So how it differs from our day-to-day life observation, we will be studying about it. So first thing is selection. So psychologists do not observe all the behaviors that they encounter. Okay, so in our day-to-day life we just observe things randomly, but when it comes to your research work, psychologists do not observe things randomly, rather they select a particular behavior for observation. Okay, so for example, I already gave you one example of one research study, that if I want to study about good study behavior and its relationship with good academic performances, so at that point of time, what I need to do is I have to observe how students are studying, okay, or how they are listening in the class, or they are attentive in the class. So all these observations I have to make. So I have to select that what I need to observe, which is relevant for my research study. I cannot just randomly observe anything. I cannot, I mean, in this particular research work, if I go and observe the behavior, how the student is eating in the canteen, okay, that won't be relevant for my research work. But what will be relevant, how the student is studying in the class, how the student is being attentive, or if the student is submitting assignments in time, which is relevant to my study work, right? So I have to select a particular behavior which is relevant for my research work. I cannot just randomly observe any kind of behavior and just put it in my data collection, okay? The second characteristic of observational method in scientific study is your recording. So, while observing, a researcher records the selected behavior using different means, such as marketing tallies for the already identified behavior whenever they occur, then taking notes, describing each activity in greater detail using shorthands or symbols, photographs, video recording, etc. So, while I'm observing your behavior, if I want to observe your behavior in the class, then I can use different means of recording, okay, to record your observations, because I cannot just remember things, right? I cannot just think, okay, this is what happened in the class, and then I can write anything that I want in my research work. No, you cannot really do that, okay? A research work has to be very systematic. So we have to do the recording properly. So if I'm observing your behaviors in the class, I may video record it, or I can take notes using shorthands or symbols, or any kind of tools I can use for recording, which will be convenient, which is feasible or relevant for my research purpose, okay? And the next one is your analysis of data. So after the observations have been made, psychologists analyze whatever they have recorded with a view to derive some meaning out of it. So you do not just collect information by observing just like that. You have to draw some meaning out of it, right? So observation is definitely an important skill, and after observing, after recording our observations, we have to draw meaning out of it, okay? We have to analyze the data collected. Now we will talk about types of observation, okay? So your first one is naturalistic versus controlled observation. So where observations are done in a natural or real life settings, like in a classroom, school setting, the example that I gave you, it's a real life natural setting. It is called naturalistic observation, because here the observer makes no effort to control or manipulate the situation for making an observation. For example, the way you are studying in class, the way you are being attentive to the class, to the teacher, this is a part of your day-to-day life, okay? I am not manipulating your situation or your classroom or anything that you are doing, your study habit. I am not manipulating anything. You come to school, you sit in your classroom, you do your classes, and you are attentive in the classroom or you are not attentive. This is a part of your day-to-day life. I am not controlling anything over here. Okay, so this type of observation is known as your naturalistic observation. I'm not manipulating any situation or any behavior here. Okay, so this type of observation is conducted in hospitals, homes, schools, daycare centers, etc. But however, many times you might need to control certain factors that determine behavior, as they are not the focus of your study. So for this reason, many of the studies in psychology are conducted in laboratory. So it is not it is not necessary, it is not compulsory that you will always conduct a research in natural settings. Sometimes your research interest may be in certain kinds of fields where you have to conduct experiments in a laboratory. You won't get a natural setting for that. So the researches which you conduct in a laboratory, okay, to study a particular behavior, okay, or the cause and effect relationship between two events, and you are controlling the antecedent conditions, okay, as in like you are controlling the cause which will give rise to the effects. So in that particular kind of situation, you are trying to control the situation, you are manipulating the situation, you are trying to manipulate the cause so that we get a desired result. Okay, so in that kind of situation, we call it a controlled observation. You are observing, but you have created that particular situation. Okay, you have created those cause, and you are going to study the effects which arises out of those causes. So this particular observation is known as your control observation. Now let us talk about non-participant versus participant observation. So observation can be done in two ways. In one kind of observation, which is non-participant observation, you observe behaviors of a person or a group from a distance, and by not being the part of the group. Suppose I want to observe behaviors of students during an exam in an examination hall. So what I can do is that in a non-participant kind of observation, while you all are sitting in the examination hall, I can just sit in a corner and I can observe everyone's behavior, okay, without disturbing the class. So that is your non-participant observation. But again, what happens in a non-participant observation, you may get conscious that we are giving our exams and then someone is observing us, so you may not display your true behaviors while you are giving your exam. If I am not present in a classroom, if someone is not observing you, then your behavior may be different. Okay, so this is one danger of non-participant observation. But in a participant observation, the observer becomes part of the school or the group of people being observed. Suppose the same same example if we take, while you all are giving examination in an examination hall, so maybe I can become one of the student who is also giving the exam, or maybe I can play the role of an invigilator, okay, rather than sitting in a corner and you will know that I am observing. I can just become an invigilator, or I can become a student and then observe the particular behavior. So I also become a participant observation, because you will not know that I am a non-participant. You will probably think I am an invigilator or I am a student like you. Okay. But however, the degree of involvement of the observer with the group being observed would vary depending upon the focus of the study. So it depends on what kind of researches you are conducting. So it depends, like whether I can become a student among you all or an invigilator. So that will also affect the observation. Okay. So the advantage of the observation method is that it enables the researcher to study people and their behavior in a naturalistic situation as it occurs. However, the observation method is labor intensive, time consuming, and is susceptible to the observer's bias. So sometimes observation can be biased also, because my observation can be different from a different individual, right? So we cannot just say that observations can be very objective. Sometimes it becomes subjective also. Okay. So it is always suggested that it's better to record the behavior first, and then we can interpret the behavior later on. If we interpret the behavior while we are observing it, then we may be more biased. Okay. But if we record it first and then we interpret it, then we will be more objective. On page number 29, you have a box 2.1. There is an example of an experiment. So before I start with the new topic of experimental method, I would like each and every one of you to open your books and go through this box 2.1. You read the experiment properly, understand it, and then you listen to my voice note about experimental method. Otherwise you won't be able to relate. Okay, so first you do that. I think you have gone through the experiment. So what happens in the experiment is that uh, the university students were asked to come for an interview on a certain topic, but actually that was not the real motive. Instead, they were asked to wait in a waiting room, and they were just given a questionnaire. Okay. So actually this questionnaire was not the real part of the experiment. They just gave the questionnaire, but just to keep them busy. But the actual experiment was that the room started to fill with smoke, okay, through a wall vent. And because of the smoke, uh, you know uh, smoke breathing became a problem, vision also became a problem. Okay. But they wanted to check that how many students will actually get up and report it to the emergency. So those students who were waiting alone, most of them, 75%, they reported the smoke. But those who were in group, they didn't really report it. Only 38% of the time they reported. And when the students waited with two other confederates who were instructed beforehand by the researcher to do nothing, only 10% students reported the smoke. So in an experiment we will be talking about it. There are some people who are already told about the experiment, and then they are actually they are placed with the subjects, those on which we are experimenting the experiment. They are placed with them, so that to manipulate the result, to manipulate the effect. Okay. So that's what researchers do. It will be more clear when you understand the concepts later on. So for now, this is a brief about the experiment. Okay. So now let us move to experimental method. What is experimental method? So experiments are generally conducted to establish cause-effect relationship between two sets of events or variables in a control setting. So in the above experiment, it was a control setting. Okay, so those students were called, those students, I referred them to as subjects. Okay, subjects, because the researchers experimented on them, that's why I'm calling them subjects. Okay, so so researchers call those students to do an experiment on them. Okay, to study the cause and effect relationship. What was the cause? The cause was the room was filled with smoke. And what was the effect? Many of the students went and complained to the emergency. That was the effect. So some of them complained, some of them didn't. Okay, we don't really know the details about the experiment, but just a gist about it, so that we understand the concept of experimental method, variables, etc. Okay, so see, what happens in an experimental method is that the researchers have control over the subjects. Okay, so you have a control over the causal factors, which in turn gives us an effect. An effect is what? An effect is the behavior that changes because of the manipulation. Okay, so now in this particular experiment only, if we think, what if the smoke didn't fill the room? Then the students wouldn't get up and go and complain to the emergency, right? They would be just sitting there and filling up the questionnaire. There wouldn't have been any change in their behavior, but maybe they got anxious, they panicked, and they went and they went and complained to the emergency. So there was some manipulation in the room. Okay, and then there was a change in their behavior. So by now I think you must have heard about the term called variable. So a researcher attempts to establish causal relationship between two variables or two events. So what is a variable? Any stimulus or event which varies, that is, it takes on different values or changes and can be measured, is a variable. So first let us understand variable in a layman's term, and then we will understand, I'll give you examples of variables in a research study. So first of all, an object by itself is not a variable. So if you are using a pen to write, so the pen is not a variable in itself, but its attributes are, as in, there are varieties of pens available in different shapes, sizes and colors. So these are variables because pens varies in sizes, colors. Okay, and the room that you are in, the room itself is not a variable, but rooms also varies in size, colors, okay, shapes. So these are variables. Okay, even as human beings also, we vary when it comes to our height, shape, figure, color, race. Okay, so when a particular stimulus varies, okay, when it comes to its characteristics, qualities, then it is known as a variable. Okay, so now let us take as example of the experiment that we just now we studied. Okay, so the aim of that research, there was a particular aim of that research. Okay, so what was the aim of that particular research? The researchers wanted to examine the effect of the presence of other persons on reporting of the smoke. Okay, remember the experiment was divided. The people were asked to go into 3 rooms. In one room no other people were present, but in the other 2 rooms there were people present. Okay, so the researchers wanted to study the effect of other people present, the presence of other persons on reporting of the smoke. So how uh, uh, people being there present in the room affects the reporting of the smoke. So researchers wanted to study about that. Okay, so here the presence of other persons is a variable, and the reporting of the smoke is also a variable. Okay, so here the presence of other persons is the cause, and the reporting of the smoke is the effect. Okay, if you think about the experiment. So here we will be talking about independent variable and dependent variable. With this example only, I'll make you understand. So an independent variable is that variable which is manipulated or altered, or its strength varied by the researcher in the experiment. Okay, so here in this experiment, the independent variable is the presence or absence of other persons. Okay, and your dependent variable is the effect. Okay, and the effect here is the reporting of the smoke. So it is the effect of this change in the variable which the researcher wants to observe or note in the study is your dependent variable. Okay, so your cause is the independent variable and the effect is your dependent variable, because effect cannot exist without the cause, right? So that's why effect becomes your dependent variable. In this particular research experiment, the reporting of the smoke wouldn't have occurred without the cause, right? So if there were in this experiment, we observed that when there were more people, then the reporting was lesser. Okay, and when there were no people, then the reporting was more. Okay, so this is the absence or presence of people is your independent variable, the cause is your independent variable, and your effect is always your dependent variable. Okay, so I think I am clear here. Now let us learn about experimental and control groups. So before this we learned about the method, experimental method. Okay, and we have studied about the research, which ones were the independent variable, dependent variable. So now taking the example from the same research, we will get to know about experimental and control groups. So experiments generally involve one or more experimental groups and one or more control groups. An experimental group is a group in which members of the group are exposed to independent variable manipulation. The control group is a comparison group that is treated in every way like the experimental group, except that the manipulated variable is absent in it. So I already told you that the independent variable is manipulated, the cause. Okay, the cause variable is the variable which is manipulated to get a desired result. So the dependent variable is your effect. So here in the experimental group, the members are exposed to independent variable manipulation. So in this group, the manipulation of the variable happens. So in the above experiment example that we have, so there were 3 rooms, right? So students were sent to those 3 rooms. So in 2 of the rooms people were already present, but in one of the rooms nobody was present. So in this particular experiment, the independent variable was the presence or absence of persons, right? So presence of people means that the independent variable is manipulated. Okay, so in 2 of the rooms there is manipulation of the independent variable, that is, people are already present there, but in one of the groups people were not present. Okay, so that is your control group where nobody was present from before. That is your control group, because the manipulation of independent variable is not present there. And in the other two rooms people were already present from there before, so the manipulation of independent variable was present, as in people were already present in the two rooms, but then in one of the rooms no instruction was given as such that if the smoke enters the room, then what to do. They were not informed from before. But in the third room, as in the second experimental group, the people who were already in there, they were already reported about this emergency situation. Okay, they were already given instruction about it. Okay, so there is a difference in three of these cases. Okay, in one room no one was present from there before. In one of the rooms uh, there were people present, but they were not given any instructions. And in the third room people were already present there and they were given instructions. Okay, so the first one is your control group, where there is no manipulation of the independent variable. Then the other two are your experimental groups, because the manipulation of independent variable is present. Okay, but the difference is, in one of the rooms the instruction was given, in the other room the instruction was not given. Okay, so if there is any confusion you can ask me, because it may get a little tricky. So when you ask me, then I can actually address your questions, then you will understand it better. So till now we have learned that in an experiment the independent variable is manipulated so that we get a particular result, the dependent variable, the effect. But then it should also be noted that in an experiment, except for the experimental manipulation, other conditions are kept constant for both experimental and control groups. Okay, so one attempts to control all those relevant variables which can influence the dependent variable. So for example, the speed with which smoke started entering the rooms, the total amount of smoke in the room, physical and other conditions of the rooms were similar in case of all the three groups. Okay, and the distribution of participants to experimental and control groups was done randomly, a method that ensures that each person has an equal chance of being included in any of the groups. So see here, what I'm trying to say is, one of the variable which we chose for our research study, the independent variable, that one we are going to manipulate. But then there can be other variables also, like I just gave you example of this particular experiment, like speed of the smoke, then speed of the smoke, amount of the smoke, other physical characteristics of the room. So all these things are also variables. But then in this experiment we don't want to study about the effect of these variables. Okay, in a research work we have to be very specific about what we are trying to study. So these other variables can also affect the outcome. Okay, if these are present, so we have to make sure that we eliminate these other variables or keep it constant, so that these other variables, they don't affect the result of our research study, because we are not taking these variables as a part of our experiment. Okay, so if there is any change because of these variables, then our research work is not going to be true. our experiment is going to fail. Okay, and I just told you that the distribution of participants to experimental and control groups, it has to be done randomly. Okay, we cannot just choose people that we want to, because otherwise biases can happen. And moreover, if we send females only to one room and males only to other room, then also we can get different kinds of responses. Okay, and now we will see that we will learn about how to control such other relevant variables, like I just said, the amount of smoke in the room, okay, distribution of people in the room. So all these are other variables which can affect our experiment. So we have to keep all these other variables constant. Okay, so I am going to talk about some of these. So since the goal of an experiment is to minimize extraneous variables, so we call these other variables extraneous variables, because these variables we cannot take them into account, because these variables they are not a part of our experiment, they are not a part of our research study. So that's why these are known as your extraneous variables. So the best way to handle this problem is to eliminate them from the experimental setting. For example, the experiment may be conducted in a soundproof and air conditioned room to eliminate the effect of noise and temperature. Okay, so like I already said that we can eliminate these kind of conditions, but again elimination is always not possible. So in such cases, what to do? So in such cases, efforts should be made to hold them constant so that their effect remains the same throughout the experiment. Okay, so for example, now controlling organismic, example, fear, motivation and background variables. See, now like I already said that if we send females to one room, males to another room, then also we may get different results. Okay, it can affect our study, because males are different from females, the way they think, the way they act. Okay, so that's why when it comes to these variables, like organismic and background variables, we have to be very careful. So here we have to use the method of matching. Like for example, in this research work, if you see, university students from a particular university were asked to come, same population, same kind of population. If we ask a person from a rural area, and if you ask a person from urban area to come, and we send the person from rural background to one room and a person from urban area to another room, then these can also become those extraneous variables. Why? Because see, maybe a person from the urban background, they may be confident about reporting it to the emergency, and maybe the person from rural background, maybe that person may be a little frightened about the whole situation and would just like to sit and wait. So we have to we have to do the matching when it comes to the research participants. We can't just select anybody that we want to. Okay, so the matching has to be done. Then and then counterbalancing is also a technique to minimize the effect of these extraneous variables. Okay, so suppose there are two tasks to be given in an experiment. Rather than giving the two tasks in the same sequence, the experimenter may interchange the order of the task. Thus, half of the group may receive the tasks in order of A and B, while the other half in order of B and A, or the same individual may be given the task in A, B, B, A order. Okay, so we do that to balance the experiment. If you I mean, see, in your exam also, if you are given different sets of questions, then they make sure that the questions, suppose there is a set A and there is a subset B, so most of the questions are going to be same, but they change the order, right? And the way you are sitting, they won't give the same set of papers who are sitting closely, right? Instead they will interchange or mix it. So the same thing is done in research work as well, so that the effect of other variables won't affect our result that we want. Okay, so random assignment of participants to different groups also eliminate any potential systematic differences between groups. So see, the thing is that again, like I said, that these experiments are done on group, so participants may tend to see each other or what other groups are doing and then get an idea. Okay, so that might cause an error to our research study. So we have to keep the participants also blind, because we are experimenting on them. Think about the example of your examination hall. Why do they do it? So that you don't cheat from each other, so that your questions are different. It's the same, but then again the set is different, so it's arranged in different ways, so that you don't look at each other, you don't cheat from each other, and then you will write your own answers, right? So that is done in examination halls, and the same thing is done in experiments, so that we get the correct result. Okay, so that we do not get result which is going to be like the participants are looking at each other, and then they are copying each other whatever the other participant is doing. So to minimize that error, this technique has been used. Okay,